Welcome to Thinkin, a podcast series by Kautilya School of Public Policy.
Namaste. Welcome to Thinkin Podcast Club of Kautilya School of Public Policy. Today we have with us Shri Anil Swarup ji. Welcome, sir. Extremely honored to have you here. I am not going to introduce Shri Anil Swarup ji as a senior bureaucrat, ex-secretary to Coal Government of India, ex-secretary to Education Government of India, or any other designations that sir delightfully handle, which is well known to one and all. But as a man of value, with being a man of success, as an honest, genuine public servant who is extremely disciplined with crystal clear thoughts, who precisely knows how to get things done while handling all the ethical dilemmas that comes in his way. As someone who is delightfully and extremely punctual, he has been always like to discuss solutions and empower other by doing one step extra than what is expected from him. Once again, Kautilya heartily welcomes you, sir. Start with question answers. Sir, how do you see the role of public policy professional in India?
First of all, thank you very much for those very kind words. I personally believe that public policy professionals have a huge role to play, and I experienced that when I was myself Secretary Government of India. And I was to look around to find people who could assist me in analyzing enormous amount of data, information that was available. I personally did not have time to browse through all that data, all that information. So what I did was I got hold of organizations like CII, FICCI and others to provide such professionals who could help me do that. Of course, they were of a different nature altogether. They were not public policy experts. So if we have people from public policy assisting policymakers at various levels, and also in the sense of implementation in the field, I think they have enormous scope. When discussions were held with regard to Kautilya School Public Policy, I personally promoted it because I felt the need for such professionals. So I do personally believe that they have a very bright future, and they would be required in formulating policies of the government at the central level, of the government at the state level, and policy formulation of other organizations. So once these people who get trained here in School of Public Policy get those faculties going, become very equipped, then they would be in a position to suggest and guide those policy makers.
Thank you, sir. How does the career trajectory looks for a public policy professional?
I probably answered it in my previous statement, and I do feel that their requirement would be not only the government but outside the government also, because policy formulation is not merely formulation of a policy, but also to see how that policy gets implemented. In both these aspects, I would believe that the public policy professionals will have a role to play, because if they have a feel of how things are happening on the ground, which probably they will in the initial part of the career, they would be in a better position to advise the policymakers on what sort of policy should be made.
Sure, sir. As we were talking, like how policy is implemented. So can you share some light on like how NGOs, non-profit organization, corporate and government is evolving in the public service delivery itself? How future public service delivery will look like according to you?
See, till the early 70s and maybe a bit of 80s, most of the public delivery was being done by the government agencies. But over a period of time, there has been a partnership with the private sector entities, including the non-governmental organizations. So over a period of time, for the past decade and a half, I think the private entities have started playing greater role in delivery of services, whether it is health services, whether it's education services, all sorts of services are being delivered by the private entities also. What is also encouraging in the recent past has been the role of non-governmental organizations, who in partnership with the government are playing a phenomenal role in reaching out to such segments where government was finding it difficult to reach out. For example, in case of out-of-school children, earlier the government used to go over, and government officers or government personnel to go over and see how to get these children to the school. But NGOs have performed a phenomenal role there. The reason is very simple. The non-governmental organizations have a better access to people as such. Between the government and the public, though ideally there should be no barrier, but practically there are barriers between the government and the public at large, and that barrier can be bridged, or that breach can be bridged by non-governmental organizations. So the partnership between NGOs and government assumes a very, very important role. And I would believe that people who get trained in public policy formulation and its implementation would be in a position to assist the non-governmental organizations also in delivery of those services.
Yes, sir. Like aptly said, bridge can be bridged. Sir, so how can you see the interactions between the top level bureaucrats, politicians, and the public policy professionals? Like how will we, how interaction will look like?
The interaction would be, for example, as I said right in the beginning, as Secretary to Government of India, I was involved or engaged in policy formulation. Now, for me to find time to assess and sift out relevant information for me to formulate policy would be very difficult, because everyone sitting at that level, whether at political level, at the bureaucratic level, they do not have time to go through all those reams of data that you have and the information that you have. In that sense, a public policy professional, if he or she develops those faculties, be able to sift out the data and present relevant information and data before the policymakers. I think in the initial period, all youngsters who do this course would be in a position to provide that assistance to the policymakers. And this would not be, as I said earlier, not only at the central level, at the state level. Some sort of a policy formulation also happens at the district level. I've been district magistrate myself. So broad policies get decided by the state or the central government, but at the local level also you have that space. And there again, I think those public policy experts could help in formulation of policy at the district level.
Sir, who should think of taking public policy as a career? Like what should be in their mind? Like if you decided, if you know you are of that caliber, you should definitely go to the public policy as a career option.
I would believe that the capacity to communicate and capacity to assimilate and understand data and analyze it and to present it appropriately should be the faculties that are absolutely imperative for a public policy person. I mean, who wants to, because ultimately the person has to understand the data, understand the information. He should be able to present that information in a manner that it becomes intelligible to the decision maker or useful to the decision maker. And this can come only if the person has capability to communicate effectively and in a rational manner. Those faculties are extremely, extremely important. The capacity to communicate effectively, to understand data purposefully, and put it in a manner that it becomes useful to the decision maker.
So next question. How do you see the role of bureaucrat who has done a master's in public policy? Will it be an additional skills that he is equipped with, or it won't make us much difference?
It will certainly help a person if he is done his master's in public policy, because he would have beforehand understood how policies do get formulated in the government, how they are implemented, what are the problems in policy formulation, and what are problems in its implementation. The civil servant actually learns this through his career. But if he has this knowledge upfront, he would not have to learn as much as he would if he doesn't have that knowledge. For example, in my own case, I had no clue how policy is formulated. I had absolutely no clue how policy is implemented. It was through a period of time that I gradually, through experience, came to learn that. If I had that, probably the task would have been much easier for me.
Rightly said. Sir, would you recommend an UPSC aspirant to do a master's in public policy simultaneously, and how he should manage, or he should go master's in public policy first and then go UPSC, prepare for UPSC, or vice versa?
It's a bit of a tough call, because public policy as such is not a paper in civil service. So probably it may be a trifle difficult, because the engagement in public policy studies is going to consume a lot of time. For preparation purposes, he or she would require much more time. So my suggestion would be, instead of preparing along with it, do master in public policy, prepare certain aspects of civil service, and then keep a year finally for the civil services. So it would be, for example, if he spends 2 years, he or she spends 2 years in public policy, She can prepare, a subject like public administration, which overlaps with public policy as a subject, and also improve upon communication skills, which are in any case required for a civil service exam, and then spend about a year preparing for the civil service.
Yes. Sir, we often see like a lot of IS officers do masters in Harvard for public policy or some other courses to build a specialization. Would you recommend like IS officers should do masters in public policy in India as well?
Why not? Earlier, I don't think there was good enough schools in India for them to do masters in public policy. Now that there are schools emerging in India, I think over a period of time, they would be doing master of public policy in India as well.
Thank you, sir. Sir, as you rightly said, that communication skills are most important, and that will be common for IS and public policy professional also. But can you shed some other skills which are most critical for both of them, and how one can improve it?
See, first, before you communicate, is your capability to analyze and understand data and information.
Yeah.
Communication skills after you understand that. Because if you've not understood properly, if you are unable to analyze the data that is available to you, if you are able to pinpoint and get the correct information, what will you communicate? So communication is important, but before that, you should be able to comprehend, analyze information that becomes available to you. So those faculties are also very important for public policy graduate or a postgraduate.
Sir, as you know, civil services is a bit competitive exam, like a lot of students preparing for it. The competitive nature of it, how one can maximize his or own chances to get clear this exam, and like after all, it is a number game.
It is not that much of a number game, and one should not bother so much about competition. One should focus totally on what he or she can do himself or herself. So what the other people do is their job. You can't do much about it. So if they are, they are. Now the question is, what do you do to yourself? Here, again, the same faculties that I had mentioned about students in public policy would be useful here, with an added aspect of becoming generally aware. Now, what is general awareness? You should be aware of what is happening around you. You should be inquisitive enough to understand the details. You should be aware of what is happening in your region, in your country, internationally. And then you'll have to develop your capability to analyze them and present them logically and rationally. Now, this all is required for any sort of exam, more so in civil service exam, where if you are able to do that, if you are able to think logically, if you are able to think rationally, if you are able to think in a manner that then you are able to express logically and rationally. So if those faculties come over a period of time, it doesn't happen overnight. Once you have that, parallelly, if you could develop communication skills, so the same thinking can then be expressed in writing or in speech.
Okay, sir. Sir, because MPP is an professionals who done masters in public policy are outside the government, how one should convince political leadership to take up some policy issues and act on it?
See, it would be difficult for a person who's done his masters in public policy to go and directly tell the politician on what should be done. It doesn't work that way, because no one is going to listen to you, because there's so much information flowing into the government, into the politician, and he would not know whether I should pick up this suggestion or that.
Yes.
So one has to go step by step. First, establish your credentials in a small way, in the sense the first initial steps, that whatever task gets given to you, you try and perform well. Then gradually your credentials will be established. Then you will be heard. I often say, खुद ही को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से खुद पूछे बता तेरी रजा क्या है. So until you make your khud hi buland, until you establish your credentials, no one is going to listen to you. You may keep shouting from rooftop, this is right, this is right. Why should anybody listen in this din of all the noises that are happening around in the environment? No one will pick it up. So establish your credentials, make a name for yourself, do well wherever you are. You don't have to necessarily go to the top man to impress upon him as to what is required, what is not required in a small domain. So for example, if you're working in a non-governmental organization, some task gets given to you, try and perform the task well. It is not a question of changing the world, as the great man said, be the change you wish to see in the world. You start with yourself, improve, establish at a lower level, wherever you are, lower or higher, doesn't really matter. Once you establish your credentials, people will start listening to you. Now, you are listening to me just now. Why? Because I climbed a few steps.
Yes.
You would be talking to me if I were appearing in the civil service exam today. So it's a question of establishing your credentials first. I mean, it's nice to aim high, it's nice to dream, but your feet should be firmly on the ground. Move step by step. Success doesn't come overnight. It is a gradual movement. So make those steps a success, the initial steps. You will gain in confidence. Other will have confidence in you, and gradually people will start listening. I mean, if you ask me, how do you make the politician listen? I don't have, a magic wand to tell you how you.
Thank you, sir. Like I can say this is $1 million advice you have gave to us. Thank you, sir. Like, sir, I wonder what is the best advice that you have ever received?
It's very difficult to pick up one of the advices. I've received, counseling from a number of people and I have benefited from them, number of them. And the one that I mentioned to you was told by my mother. My mother, in my initial career, in my life, in fact, not career, in my life, till class 7, I didn't win a single certificate or a medal. And I used to feel very frustrated. I thought I'm good for it. I'm good for it, but I'm not winning. And she used to tell me, why don't you focus on what you're doing? Enjoy what you're doing. And she used to say something which I didn't understand at that point in time. She told me, Karmanne vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. I didn't understand that. She used to explain to me, results are not in your hand. Start enjoying the moments that you're in. Start enjoying the journey. It dawned on me gradually. And when I, got to my college, there again, when I faced some failures, I learned from those failures. And I remember my mother now, who's no more, she used to tell me that. And probably that was the best advice.
Okay, sir. Like, if I can summarize, like, you are saying, love what you do, and then do what you love. Is that correct?
A slight difference. Yes, you do what you love. That's fine. But if you can generate or create a likeness for what you're doing, you were right. Because once you start liking or loving things that you're doing, then the journey becomes enjoyable. The results will come, but it doesn't really matter because they are not in your hand.
Yes. Sir, what is the one thing you would like people to remember about you at the end of your life or after your life?
Here lies a man who tried a few things. He
Nice.
succeeded in some, he failed in some.
Sir, with due respect, what is your biggest weakness?
I lose my temper. I used to lose it a lot earlier. I have tried to control it, and that is probably my biggest weakness. I was very short-tempered. I've managed to control it a bit, but I still do get upset on issues which probably could be avoided.
Okay, sir, one thing that world doesn't know about you yet.
I have my weaknesses, a lot of them.
Okay, sir. One thing you wish you could change about yourself.
Get lesser, agitated about issues. I do get agitated still.
And one thing you wish to change in the world itself.
Bring in more love than a hatred.
Okay, sir. Now we'll come to the most interesting and rapid fire round, which is the one thing that comes to your mind when you listen to the word change.
Myself.
Power.
Useless.
Ethics and state.
Passionate.
Job satisfaction.
Couldn't be better.
Success.
Comes and goes.
How will you measure success?
Sense of satisfaction.
Duty.
Absolutely above everything else.
Transfers.
Doesn't matter.
Non-profit organizations.
Doing wonderful job.
Corporates.
They contribute substantially, but they can do better.
Profit.
It's not a dirty word.
Efficiency. State.
Sorry?
State.
State.
Capital S. State.
Sorry?
Sir, capital S. State.
state. I loved the state where I came from, Uttar Pradesh.
Okay, sir. Thank you for joining us, sir.
I feel this was quite an extraordinary conversation. All of us, and I'm sure viewers, will also know more about public policy, civil services, their interactions, and much more. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this insightful and lively discussion.